Hey guys, I'm the Philosopher, and welcome to another episode of FGC Philosophy, where I help you guys level up inside and outside the virtual arena by having guests like Frabisaur on the show. This guy's a content creator and really good content, by the way. I've actually taken in some content, and he's helped me level up, specifically with set play, but we'll get into that later on. But yeah, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, thanks, man. Appreciate you having me here, and I like your philosophy as well, and kind of what you try to do. Definitely lines up with what I want to help people with because fighting games are really great. They're really fun and they're really hard to get into.
Yes, all the same true.
It's anything to help people get into the really enjoyable, deep parts of fighting games is what's up. So.
Yeah, that's when it gets really fun. So yeah, that's definitely. So I have to ask. I mean, you've been doing videos for about a year now. What possessed you to start this? Like, how did it start?
Okay, so I guess I'll just go a little bit of my background. I started fighting games about 6 months before the end of Super Street Fighter 4. I can't remember what the year would be. It was in like 2013.
Yeah, it was a while ago.
Yeah, right before AE ended. So for about 6 months I played AE, then Ultra came out, and then I basically was learning fighting games during Ultra Street Fighter 4 during that whole time. And then 5 and yada yada. Technically the first game I ever played was Marvel because that game looked so cool. And I was like, I want to learn that. And then you find out that game is massively difficult.
Marvel 2 or 3? 3? Okay. Oh wow. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, definitely not something I would tell you to start with for sure. But if you did, go for it. So I was, I'm trying to learn how to play these games. I can kind of see what's going on, and this is what's difficult. You can watch Daigo, Tokido, anybody, and you know what they're doing, right? Like you saw a crouching medium kick into whatever confirm, right? Even in like the really difficult set play, you saw the OS happen, you get it, but you can't do it, right? You can't fight an opponent, you can't get anything. Like you just don't know how to think, you don't know how to do correctly. Everything just feels really, really wrong and awkward, and your mind is blank most of the time. And so I was just scouring the internet, like, does anyone have something to just teach me what to do? I feel like it can't be that difficult. Playing sports and learning to play sports, if learning a new game, a new board game or video game of any kind, usually it's not that hard to learn the rules and kind of get into playing. Learning an instrument, like it's very procedural. Like start practicing this, then practice this, then practice this, and it just builds and it's very natural. And I just couldn't find that. Couldn't find it anywhere. Everybody was saying all these really weird, obscure things like study frame data. It's like, cool. What am I going to do, though? I studied the frame data. What am I going to do now? I still don't do the right thing when someone jumps. That doesn't help me. You need to make sure every time you touch someone, you get a lot of damage. Cool. That doesn't help me. Like I can't use that and go play now. So I just kind of naturally, as the majority of people go, as the longer you play with good people, and you kind of get small feedback and things just randomly click over time. Developed that way. And then 5, and I was playing in 5, and probably about after the first year of Street Fighter 5, I thought I feel like I should just make some beginners content. I should just make something to help people learn. So I go to final round, and I sit down with this guy who's like super enthusiastic, loves the game, and is just really excited to play. He like bought it's his first tournament. He like buys a stick the day before. He like dropped a bunch of money putting his buttons in because like you get a tournament and you want to like revamp your whole stick every time you go to a tournament, make it look all awesome because you see like hundreds of different sticks there. And he was just like he wanted to play everybody. He was so excited, and so he sits down for an hour and he's talking with this guy and he's playing, and then I sit down and I play with him, and I'm just like. Hey, I can tell like the new year excited. He was asking like after everything that happened, he would ask a question. He just like wanted to learn. So like every moment in the game, he's asking a question. I'm explaining to him, and he goes, "Oh, yeah, that guy like said something about frame data. It made zero sense at all." But then I was showing him, and he's like, "Okay, I get that. That makes sense." And so basically, I took the last hour of the conversation he had with one guy, reinterpreted it for him over like another hour session of just me and him. And he walked away feeling like he totally understood. And I think he had some friends there, and he either won or came really close to winning one of his pool matches with someone of pretty equal caliber. And he was super excited, and he was just like over the moon, ready to like play and learn and go to more tournaments and stuff. And I was like, you know what, it's time. I need to make I need to make these videos. And so then I sat down and I recorded Fighters Dojo episode 1, and people responded really, really well. And so then I made episode 2, 3, and on and on.
Nice. Okay, man. A couple of questions I want to ask her. I'm not sure where I want to go with this. Well, first off, the thing that I wanted to point out was the fact that like a lot of people don't quite understand that just because someone is good at something doesn't mean they're good at teaching it. Those are two completely different skills.
Absolutely, I agree. There's that aspect that just because you get to sit down with PR Rog, you get to sit down with Gamer B, you get to sit down with these guys, it doesn't mean that they can explain to you what they're doing. That doesn't mean that they're not incredibly good at what they do. It just means that they can't actually teach the concept. And that's a large, I mean, that's widespread, that some of the best at something can't teach you how to do it because they just don't know the words and the way to break down the concept. And I have this kind of theory that there's this, and it's funny because I base it off of this old stupid movie called Baby Geniuses, where it was like before 1 or 2 years old, before they could actually say words, they like had infinite knowledge and they were like geniuses. But then once they crossed over, they couldn't go back and they lost their knowledge, right? And it's kind of like that with fighting games. There's this point where you actually understand how to play fighting games, and you kind of get the ebb and flow of like, I'm playing another human and everything I do is involved in this context, this constantly changing context of a human and a character. And both of those things are always influencing the decisions that we make, right? Because his character limits his options, and this human has to make decisions based on those options. And so figuring out what they like to do helps me figure out which options he's most likely going to go with, which is a long explanation for what you do in a split second. So there's this moment where you get there and you really don't understand what it's like to be someone that doesn't get that. And so when you try to explain to someone about this, you talk like they're on this side of the spectrum that gets what it means to play a fighting game. And so whatever you're telling them just falls on dead ears because they don't at all understand what you're talking about. They've not experienced that, and they don't have any kind of capacity. They don't have the categories in their mind to place the information that you're giving them. It just falls dead because frame data means nothing if you don't understand the complexity of the game. Confirming and how to confirm are two totally different things. To confirm is something I can do on my own. Learning how and when to look for a confirm is something that only experience against a live opponent can teach me, when it's likely that they're standing up so that the low is going to clip them. And to anticipate the low clipping because I've seen you walk away from me. That's stuff that like you don't know until you've seen and done it so many times that you just inherently know. And so I think that a lot of experienced players in very well-intentioned ways want to help younger players. They just don't remember what it's like to not know anything, to not understand what it means to play a fighting game. And that's what I want my content to do. I want it to usher people kind of across the chasm. So there's that. And the other thing is that people think if you play matches with someone good, it's automatically going to help you. And that's not the case either. You can sit down and get your teeth kicked in by Chris G for an hour, and it did nothing for Chris G and it did nothing for you. Because the gap between you guys is so large, there was nothing to be gained by either person. He just didn't really even try or fight, and it was just really easy for him to do whatever he wanted, and you just felt what it was like for someone of such great caliber to beat your teeth in. Thumbs up.
Yep.
You didn't actually grow as a player today. And so, yeah, there's these two kind of things at play, and I really wanted content to help for that gap that I couldn't find anything for. Because now any content works for me because I understand, right? And so if you want to talk about a really specific setup or how to think about Nash in the neutral, I have the categories for that, and I can get what you're talking about, and I can break down the minute choices that Vaughn Chen makes in the Mika matchup. And it makes sense to me, and I can just take that on site in a 15-minute video and now use it every time I play. That would be nothing. That would be nothing to me 5 years ago. No, I wouldn't get it. And I try to literally just copy-paste what he did. So I'd watch him, and I'd just copy-paste what he did, and then it wouldn't work, and I couldn't figure out why.
Yeah. There's a lot to unpack with what you just said. There's like so many different concepts to think about that I think like the listeners and maybe even yourself should like be aware of. Like when it comes to the example that you're talking about with like an expert trying to explain something to a novice, there's things that go on in a brain. Like there's different things like when you're learning how to do a combo and you're learning how to do I'll call it a sequence. I don't know the exact name, but a combo into a knockdown into a meaty setup into another combo into a crush count, like this long sequence.
Set play would be the total category, but like a sequence.
Thank you. Yeah. So that whole thing, there's this concept called chunking. Cool. Okay, you know what it is. So basically, to explain it to the listener, you take a lot of information. Chess is a really good example. You take all these complicated movements and you take similar items and you compartmentalize them to make it the burden easier on your brain so that you're not expending as much energy. And so these connections are different for an expert because they've basically compressed a lot of information to a small chunk of area. And so they kind of correlate all of these things together where an expert sees like that crazy formula and all those memes that people when they're thinking.
Yeah.
And on top of that, there's the muscle memory, which kind of happens, kind of causes chunking to happen either automatically or you can do it consciously. Some people learn differently, so some people purposely do it. Other people just over time when they get good, that happens. And so you don't have this muscle memory to even be able to comprehend how to like do the next level. So the novice player is on this like lower level, kind of like an RPG, where they don't have access to these skills and knowledges whatsoever. They can't see it. So it's like almost like a language barrier. And then like you have this hive mind mentality where the expert assumes they know A, B, and C, when in fact they don't. It's like going to a store or working at a store or something like that, and a customer expects you to know everything that happened to another associate that you worked with, and it doesn't work that way. So there's so much there that I think experts, and it's not any of their fault, because it's not something that's common sense to someone who's not a teacher. So it's very fascinating that you've come across a lot of this stuff on your own, either naturally or maybe perhaps, I'd like to know more about your background when it comes to teaching people how you actually discovered these things that other people weren't answering.
Yeah. So I think one of the best things you can do in life is find the ways that you are personally gifted and just maximize your strengths. Shoring up your weaknesses is important, but you're never going to be what's going to carry you, right? You need to capitalize on your strengths, what you're really, really good at, and make the most of those, because that's where you're going to be able to offer the most to whatever it is, a company, a relationship, a project, is what you uniquely can offer the best. I personally believe that you were created with, things that you are really good at and things that you just aren't good at. However it come to be, though, I think we can all agree nonetheless that some people are good at some things and not other things, and other people are good at some things and not other things. No one's good at everything 100%, right? I'm never going to go be an NBA player. It's just not going to happen. I wasn't gifted that way. I can shoot a basketball, but not me. So what I do feel personally gifted in is I'm a very good information synthesizer. I can take a lot of stuff in, kind of figure out everything going on and correlate it, web it together, and then be able to explain what's going on with it. So I have that, and then I do feel very gifted as a teacher. My job is to teach at the middle and high school level. But I've always enjoyed, even from a young age, if I understood something, I like to explain to other people how to do it as well. I like to explain how to think strategically about the sport that we were playing, because, in like Little League, the kids are like, well, I just do what the coach told me. And I'm like, no, you got to look at like, hey, the dude on second was like 10 feet off the bag and he wasn't paying attention. We could have gotten that guy rather than just throwing it to the pitcher because that's what you were told to do. Right. So I was always kind of thinking that way about the stuff that I was doing, because I was an information synthesizer. And then I just love to explain that to people. So both of those served me very, very well to observe what was going on and to see where the massive gaps were, and be able to kind of use what I'm already good at to provide something there. Because I knew pretty quickly when I was watching something, I'm like, this can't help me. This doesn't mean anything. So I guess I'll just go back to beating my head against the wall in training mode and see if something happens here. But I was also able to slowly pick some things up watching like Excellent Adventures and Maximilian Dude and watching tournaments. I could see things and I could copy them, but then I could also see that purely copying them wasn't working either. So it started to come together for me, all these kind of revolving pieces that we're talking about, because fighting games at their core are extremely abstract. There is nothing procedural about a fighting game. And so it's like a board game to a degree, but then it ceases to become like a board game very quickly, and it creates a lot of difficulty because players who are starting are like, hey, I learned the rules, right? Which is here's the button, here's the combo, here's the anti-air, but I can't play the game. And it's like, I know if this was Monopoly, once you read the rule book, you're good to play, right? Doesn't mean you're going to be good at it, but you can still play. You can learn all the rules in a fighting game and you're not going to be able to play, right? I can know literally, and it's funny because you see like the really long tutorials from like Guilty Gear and Unial and all that stuff, or Unist now, and they'll walk you through literally everything in the game, even like the really conceptual stuff like option selecting throws, and you can memorize all that. It's not going to make you able to play.
Yeah,
it's not going to make you able to play. It's so there's this very important gap in between knowledge and application in fighting games. That's very hard to bridge people, one, without experience, and two, without actual guidance at their level, which is that language barrier you're talking about. I think that's the biggest thing. It's this language barrier, because the idea behind saying scrub the frame data has so much contextual meaning that is lost on this guy because they've not experienced the context 500 times to intrinsically understand the context that they're in.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of on that point, very recently I've been making it a point to learn the lingo, so to speak, of each individual fighting game. I play multiple fighting games, not really any of them at a high level. Like I'm close to platinum at Street Fighter, but like I teach people games as I learn them, and I found that as I started learning the lingo, well, two things. One, I started learning the lingo, and that helped me really. A lot of times, if you look at like Street Fighter, for example, all the face buttons, you have jab, strong, fierce.
Yeah.
And same thing with the kicks. If you look at it,
short forward roundhouse. Yeah.
Yeah. All of those words are faster to say than their counterparts. Just about, because it's like one less syllable for every single one of those, at least one. So that alone, you're able to say things in your head faster. You're able to think about it the same way to other people thinking about it. You're able to get into other people's heads as well. And it's really fascinating how that actually shifts. Like it seems like I resisted it for so long because I'm like, why am I saying that version? Like, why am I saying what they're saying? I wanted to say what it literally is. And I resisted it for so long. And it's hard to explain because I'm like going to that mode to where I'm understanding it and just saying it out loud. But it just makes things a little bit easier and kind of puts you in the game a little bit more. It
does, yeah. But I also don't want people to come up with the idea that if you just learn all the lingo, right? You learn what it means when we say set play, option select, delay, throw tech, right? That doesn't mean you're going to be efficient at any of that. But it does help you at least feel more comfortable in the conversation, which is very good. You feel comfortable in the conversation, and that like when you ask the question, you're not getting what sounds like a different language coming back to you. I still struggled. I think the biggest struggle though is that Baby Geniuses gap though, where this guy doesn't know how to explain what he's talking about to someone who doesn't know what it's like to understand the game. It's this really strange gap because you have to explain to someone who doesn't understand the game what's happening and help them learn to understand the game. Because it's a real exercise of psychology at the end of the day. It's this really deep exercise of psychology because it's a person with a fully free will that you have no control over acting at the exact same time as you are. The only restriction is the game engine and the characters. Otherwise, like, people can just do whatever they want. And they can do it at the exact same time as you're doing whatever you want. So that's really, really strange to get in and interact efficiently and competently in. It's such a unique scenario.
Yeah, it's really, really fascinating because you have people like, combo artists who are fantastically good at execution, but they have no sense of neutral or understanding of the meta of the game. So when they go and fight people, they lose consistently, even though their execution is immaculate.
They can do a combo you could only dream of. Right.
Yeah, I know people like that personally where I can see them do amazing combos, but they don't know how to utilize it outside of just in training mode. And quite the opposite, where you have people who have a very vast knowledge of the game and how people are going to play, but they don't have the execution or muscle memory to be able to actually do any of it themselves. So there's like maybe there's three that I'm not thinking of, but the two that I see is usually like competency and then like the knowledge side. Like you have to really balance it. So you have to balance the muscle memory. So you have to, practice putting it on random and practicing your hit confirms and so on and so forth. But you also have to like play matches and watch matches and critique yourself. Self-correct in order to actually have a knowledge of how like the meta works. And to that point, I feel like, once you learn the rules, there's rules within rules because of like the mechanics of the game itself plus the meta. Those both kind of create the rules. Like frame data is a rule in itself, and then
but
also
you can usurp the rules in certain situations. Yeah.
Justin Wong talked about this too. What was it? Breaking the meta or something like that. It was a video that he did with a collaboration where he was talking about the meta, and once you understand it, and it's kind of like music or any other art, honestly, where once you understand the rules, the meta, you can break it. Because you have a knowledge and a mastery of it. You have to have both those things, and once you do, you can kind of make it your own. Just like music, where you replicate the masters and you learn the rules and music theory, but then all of a sudden you make like these beautiful music of your own, where you pull from all these other things, but it's your own style because you broke the meta of music.
Absolutely, yeah. You start by copying, and then you eventually develop your own. But you can't really put out your own until you have long-term disciplined yourself with all of the core just mechanical things involved, doing the things correctly, and studying the people that came before you that have already developed, right? Just kind of taking their knowledge and then moving past it. Yeah, I totally agree. I think music's a great analogy or a great parallel with fighting games.
No need to reinvent the wheel also. Like learn from the people that already have done it. They might not be able to explain it, but you can watch them. Yeah,
don't play Guile like a grappler. Like, just don't do that.
Well, something I actually wanted to ask you, pick your brain about, because you do call it, the dojo. Something I've always been fascinated about is fighting games. I have a martial arts background. I've done various kinds of martial arts, and I really feel like fighting games are definitely an extension of that. I mean, obviously it emulates it, but what's interesting is the learning process of karate, how you have the white belt, so on and so forth. And I feel like with fighting per se or martial arts, people can learn on their own and be a good scrapper, or even like an intellectual fighter if they create their own style. But what I always found interesting was like the way the sensei teaches you is the way that people should learn fighting games, because you learn every move in isolation. A good resource, like the closest resource is Geef's gym. You learn the distance of your normals and so on, and you do them individually, then you put them together, you combine them, and you build this muscle memory over time until where like you understand it individually, and you keep building on that foundation, and everything that you're learning in karate, you're building on what you already learned rather than learning something completely unrelated. You're using what you know. And I feel like if someone could create a structure, maybe there already is one, and I just have like maybe in Japan or something like that. But where they learn, like there's a process to expedite the there's a teaching process to expedite the learning process for fighting games. I believe. So I'd be curious to know, one, if have seen martial arts, like the learning process of it, and like what you think of equating that to fighting games.
No, I if I could say a word, I definitely agree. I think that's another strong parallel. There's multiple, but that's the obvious, very, very close parallel. The way you learn, and kind of the rules and mentality of both, especially when you have formal competitive sparring, right, for points and everything like that. It's very, very similar to what a fighting game is asking you to do, because you can practice a punch in the dojo 1,000 times. It doesn't mean you're going to land it on a human being that doesn't want to be punched and also wants to punch you at the same time, who also has a different, not going to be too far, but a different size and weight than you, and a different wingspan and different legs, right? Like all of that matters, which is what character models and archetypes are supposed to emulate, right? These variety of opponent and matchup styles. That way it's not just, Ryu versus Ryu every single match, because people are different and fighting. All fights are different. So Geef's Gym is about, I don't know if Geef's Gym I don't know if it tells you how to put it together as much as it's like just a large dictionary or glossary, right? Of like, here's everything, like in an isolated unit. So now you know exactly what the thing is, right? This is what a meaty is. Here's the explanation. Here's how you can practice it, right? Here's what a normal is. Here's, and it gives you all the parts with good information and practice on it, but it doesn't tell you how to put it together. And then Japan, I know they have a lot of teacher relationships, especially the pros want to give back. I don't know how they do it though. I believe, right, because even in my videos, I've shown a lot of training room exercises to practice things. But even in my private sessions, I've told a lot of times with students, like, I don't believe that the majority of these skills are mechanical in nature. I believe the majority of your fighting game skills are mental in nature. And it's the reason why the training room exercise for an anti-air is actually not totally sufficient. Because in the training room exercise, you know that the opponent is going to jump eventually. You also know that the opponent is actually not trying to kill you. So they're never going to attack you. So you never actually have to fear or worry or stop them any other way, because they're not going to come and take your life with a combo. So you just wait for the jump. And you also know the only things that the opponent will do, which is one of three things. Now, it is good at the random kind of sight to muscle reaction to, they jumped, I need to do the move. But that's as far as it can take you, right? Hey, they jumped, they need to do the thing. But there's a reason why people and the complaint I often hear is that I practice anti-airs in training mode and I never hit them in a game. That's because I think the actual skill of anti-airing is far more a mental skill than just purely a mechanical skill. Completing a combo when a jump in hits is pretty mechanical in nature. Just follow through with what you've done a million times, close your eyes, you should still be able to do it. Right? But actually anti-airing a living, breathing opponent that is trying to get close to you to take all of your life and you don't know when they're going to jump, it's totally different. Because that has to do with situational awareness, being ready and anticipatory for the moment, seeing the person's tendencies, as well as knowing what you did that might make them jump. Things that you can do that might make them jump or hint at that a jump is likely. All those things need to inform your current attention and awareness that a jump might come. And sometimes you're totally not ready for the jump and you have to rely on just a gut reaction to rip out a quick anti-air normal or DP motion, which does help. But the majority of the time, most players are at least over halfway anticipatory of the jump when it happens. And it's not as reactionary as people think the skill is. I think that's a lot of stuff in fighting games. It's so much mental skill because you are very, very aware of the moment and what is possible and what is likely. You have a more anticipatory nature to all the things that you're doing. But you're also you're anticipating. It's kind of like a choose your own adventure story tree. You come to a fork, but you're anticipating 4 things happening, not just one thing happening. You maybe want one, but you're still able to anticipate 4, so that when one of them happens, you can react to the thing you've practiced and do what you need. Right?
Yeah. To kind of go back to chunking a little bit, this is something that I think a lot of experts or higher level players automatically do. To your point, what you're talking about is basically a player gets to a point to where they recognize the situation and they basically boil it down to what's most likely to happen. A person's not going to randomly do a DP at this situation unless they're like a Ken player or something like that. So they're going to probably do this certain set of things. And if they're at a certain distance and they're in their corner, one of those things is probably jump out of the corner. So you have that ready to go. You're buffering it with other things in mind. And that isn't people kind of I think confuse reactions with predictions a lot of times. If you have something in your mind and you're ready to do it, you're anticipating that. You are technically reacting to it, but you reacted because you were already anticipating it. And then to that point, a lot of people, something that I want to talk about more in a video eventually is decision fatigue. A lot of players, because they're not chunking down these situations, because they don't have the experience to do so yet, they are basically pressing random buttons, thinking that anything can happen at any given moment, and not understanding the meta and stuff like that. So they get frustrated and bogged down with more decisions faster because they're not reducing their amount of choices. They think that there's so many choices to make, and they're always making the wrong ones and beating themselves up or blaming the opponent for being cheap or whatever. And so that's when you hit that frustration barrier again. So yeah, there's so much to think about in these situations that don't get broken down as much as I feel they could. And it's obviously not, for a good reason. It's just, most people don't think that way. But yeah, no, there's so much there. I don't know if you have anything to add on to that.
No, but I think new players get tired much more quickly. They get tired early on because the game is so wide open to them. And it's so mysterious and unpredictable. And so there's this mixture of anxiety and decision fatigue and this just kind of open water kind of feeling as everything is happening, that it makes everything continue to elevate in this feeling of out of control spiraling. And all of that just totally wears on the mind, And yeah, so I think that's a really good way to put it. But it's also funny because there are actually character archetypes based around decision fatigue. If you look at Cammy right now, she's based around decision fatigue. Because when she gets in, she has a 4 to 5 button string that can throw at 3 different moments in it. So the defending player is forced to make a decision 5 times in 2.5 seconds, right? And any one of them being wrong turns into a counter hit, confirm, or a throw into let's do it again. Wow. It's one of the big complaints against Cammy, but right. So like rushdown characters do function off decision fatigue, and there's times in my videos, especially if you watch the Walking the Path ones, I'll explain about blowing all my bar for certain moments to create decision fatigue. I will force them into -2, -2, -2, where they have to guess button or throw so many times because I want them to shut down because they've had to make so many decisions that whatever I do after all that, if none of that worked, they're just done. And then they just kind of default to something silly like, well, I'm just going to jump out of the corner now when I backed off of you because I blew all my bar. And then I just anti-air for the win. So stuff like that. And then there's also, like minimizing the options is huge. And it's something that I've shown people and I've tried to describe to players in sessions a lot. And you could probably pull a clip because it happens all the time on my Walking the Path videos. So something very common that I'll do. Especially because, you'll have V-Trigger when both characters are about half health, unless I'm getting beat up, then only I'll have it. But they'll be about half health. I'll do his EX Spoon, Tragedy Assault mix-up for the left-right. I'll hit them. And then when I do, I'll go into his target combo reset, which is where he does the standing medium punch into the Bazooka knee, and it's +3. And I'm obviously looking at your health and your stun, and you're not. So what happens is, the only thing that could go wrong for you here is that you try to tech the throw. That's literally the only way this could go wrong for you. You can't die and you can't get stunned by a counter hit combo if you let me throw you, and nothing can happen after the throw, right? Like survive to make a better guess for yourself, because this 50-50 is not worth it. Just eat the throw if I'm going to do it, and then go ahead and take the next defensive setup, which is a much, much more favorable situation for you and a much easier guess. But no, they fear. They try to tech the throw. They get counter hit because I win if you tech the throw, and I'm safe if you don't, right? And so then you get counter hit. I burn my bar. You get stunned and die, right? And it's like if you were looking, there is literally you take the throw here, and this is one of those situations where we say take the throw, we actually mean it. Like by taking the throw, you are eliminating decision choices that can kill you, and then putting yourself in an easier decision than the very next one. And so like even thinking about the next decision, right? Letting something happen to think about the next decision. Intentionally backdashing to eat a counter hit meaty that air resets you to get you out of the 50-50 off of the second meaty, right? Because then you're too far away and they got no throw. There's so like stuff like that is just not even in their brain. But it's also because they're not super cognizant of situations and context. But that's one that happens overwhelmingly often, where I'll just do the reset, and it's funny how often it happens. I'm like, literally the only way you die right here is tech. It's the only way you die. And then sometimes I'll throw and they'll tech the throw, and I'm like, that was the only way you could have died. There's no reason for you to press that button. Because if I didn't throw here, because I was assuming you would know that, you would have gotten counter hit and it'd be over. But if you get thrown, nothing happens. You're not stunned and you're not dead. But they still tech the throw. I'm just like, you weren't looking. You have no idea that you could have just died right there.
What's their response when you address that?
They're kind of like, oh, I didn't even notice, because they're not looking at it, right? There are 6 pieces of information on the screen at all times that you need to be aware of: health, stun, V trigger, super, time, distance. Always. Those are always on the screen, and they always matter, right? And when I say health, like all these things, I'm talking about both characters. Time's the only one that doesn't have 2 characters, right? But those are always on the screen, and there's a reason why they are where they are, so that they don't affect your players overlapping, so you can fight. But they have big, bright colors on purpose to help you see them. And when they're full or activated, they also have flashing animations so that you can see, right? CA flashes, literally a CA pops up and flashes when it happens. and the V lights up with a number and flashes when it's active. And then stun and health you just keep track of, and they're bigger and they're on top. But they're always there on purpose because this information hugely affects every decision, and they help you know what risks are worth taking and what risks aren't worth taking. So I just got reset. I only die to a counter hit. I'm not pressing the dang button. Throw me if you want. I only die to a counter hit here. You will not catch me throwing. There's actually, and I know I'm going off, but there's an episode coming up with a Ken. So a common thing that happens with Ken when he's in V-Trigger 1 is he puts you in the heavy kick Tatsu mind game, right? So he does heavy kick Tatsu. When you block it, Ken's only -2. However, he can steal the turn back by DPing, because when you go to challenge, because it's your turn technically, you get DP'd. And if you fear the DP and do nothing to block it, they throw you, right? And so they did technically a huge 7-frame throw, but they got you from the mind game. And it's this scenario that's kind of like frustrating to deal with, because Ken's technically giving up his turn, but that DP mind game can let him keep his turn anyways. So he gets to cross the screen, make you block, and keep his turn because of the mind game. And you got to be willing to make the call. Press the button, don't press the button. And that's just what it comes down to. So there's a Ken. I've got probably a quarter of my bar and 2 meters and no V-trigger. I've already used it, so I can't V-reversal to escape the situation. He's in V-trigger 1. He's got 2 bars as well. He does the DP. And I say, there is literally nothing you could have made me do in that scenario to press a button. I'm like, you can 100% throw me because you cannot kill me off this throw. And the next guess is not a 50-50 because you can't get to me to 50-50 because I wasn't in the corner, nor does he have a corner throw loop anymore. So like, no matter what, eating the throw here doesn't lead me to a 50-50. And the only way I die is getting DP'd. So as soon as he Tatsu'd, I'm holding down back, and you couldn't pay me to take off, and you couldn't pay me to press a button because I know I've taken out all the information that's around the screen, and I just go ahead, throw me. You can have it. I take the throw. It's fine. You can absolutely have that. I'll still have at least 2 hits worth of health unless it's a combo. I can be thrown again, and I'm not gonna die. But if you DP, you have no health and you're dead. And he does. He DPs and he dies. But that's a situation where it's like there is no guess to be made. There's no guess to be made there. If you're paying attention, you know that. There's nothing for me to do. He can have it. You can have the throw. It affects me none. But if you're not paying attention, you get terrified and you start teching or you start guessing and you eat a DP and you get frustrated. It's like, if you took any information, you should have known that you were not at risk. The only way you could have died was by trying to respond.
So how do you help people make wiser decisions then?
So it's difficult, because that's unless they're early in their fighting game kind of development. And I use the word immature, and I explained it to them, and people have never been offended by it because it's like, because immature has this like socially immature connotation where you act like a child. It's like, no, immature just means not developed, right? Like mature is fully developed, immature is underdeveloped. I'm like, you're just kind of immature as a player right now. You need to know all the basics. So unless they're more of an immature player that just needs to really kind of grind anti-airs and combos to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing in these scenarios, a lot of the one-on-one work has to do with this wise decision-making, taking into account information and thinking. So I do a couple things to do that. One, I play sets and I just stop them whenever they make a decision. I'm like, were you paying attention? Did you see these things? And they'll say no. I'm like, right, you have to be aware. You have to be able to see these things. And a lot of times it'll go like 3 games of the same thing happening. Like, I mean, I've done sessions where I think I've done activate the Kali V trigger into super on a fireball, like on reaction from mid screen. I think I killed him with it 6 times before he finally stopped throwing fireballs. But it's just kind of like, if you're not paying attention, it's going to continue to happen. And I will continue to do it until you pay attention. So there's that. And the other thing I think works really, really well is I call it live coaching, where I have like a voice chat open and then they play someone else. And then I'm just in their ear talking and helping them think through, because I'm getting in their thoughts as they're playing, as opposed to this more controlled environment where I'm just like, stop, let's explain this. Because I can't stop that opponent, and that opponent's going to do what they're going to do. So I'm kind of like in their thoughts, trying to help them think as it's going on. Like, hey, watch that he's doing this over and over again. Do you see it? Yeah, make sure we respond to it, right? Hey, you have a life lead. Stop. Pay attention. You have a life lead. Stop filling in. Let him kill himself. It's okay. Just find the anti-air. Just find the anti-air. And then, they completely shift what they were doing and the way they were thinking to this better way. And I think that works really well. So pragmatically, that's how I try to help people think better.
And that's via share play, right?
Share play or screen sharing if they play on PC, yeah.
Ah, okay. Just making sure. Yeah, I saw a few videos of that. I thought that was a great idea. I wish I would like to see more people definitely doing that. I think that's a great resource that's not being tapped into enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that one the most because it's me engaging with your thought process in a match. Because if I do it with me, that's still a super controlled environment, and people don't feel the pressure of fighting another opponent and someone watching, so it's very unrealistic to when I'm not there, which is what my coaching is supposed to help them be better when I'm not there. It offers a lot higher variety of matchups, people that are going to do things and adapt differently. And it doesn't, I don't stop the match, right? I can't stop that match, whereas ours, the only way to explain something to them is to stop the match and then walk them back through the scenario, which is very different than in the moment being like, hey, I got hit by this twice. Let's stop getting hit by this.
Okay. The last big question I could think of to ask is about like the emotional side of fighting games. A lot of people get tilted, and that's a very broad term in my opinion, but that's a term that we use. But they get tilted, and it affects their performance. Mm-hmm. What do you do to address those kind of situations, or do you even address those?
Yeah, so I think actually, fun tidbit, I think the term tilt originally came from poker, actually, if I recall correctly.
It's the debate between poker and pinball.
Oh, okay. All right, well, tilt is the literal thing. Like, you tilt the machine, but tilted in terms of, and maybe they were referencing, like, you tilt the machine and it shuts down, and you can't play. Maybe right. That's what they're, but I think, like, in the way we use it, we're like, I'm tilted and I'm making terrible decisions, and I've gone tunnel vision. I think poker took that first, if I recall correctly. So emotions. Emotions are great, and it's, that's really, really hard, because emotions are great, and honestly, they're probably better suited for after the match than in the match, because you should feel elated or let down depending on certain matches, and it's kind of wrong to deny those feelings. Like, you lost grand finals. So like at my last local, I reset the bracket and lost last game, last round 3-2. Like, I was sad. I was like, that I came so far and I just missed it. And it'd be wrong to deny yourself that actual emotional feeling of something that was really, really, important. It was cool. You fought really hard. You cared. And in the moment, your feelings, if we're calling like just your intuition, your gut, and maybe some of those feelings of confidence that you can get, those feelings of creativity that you can get, those feelings of a little bit of anger that can sometimes channel really well your mix-ups, and depending on who you are as a player, right? Some people get better when they're a little bit angry, and some people get worse. They can all absolutely fuel your gameplay, but they can very, very effectively shut you down to play the worst you've ever played in your life, especially tilt. So the only true way to escape tilt is to either walk away from the game and come back when you're not feeling that way anymore, or find some way to like completely decompress that emotion out. Like it's one of those things that like has to have its end. I think if you're a little bit tilted or you're kind of salty and you go back in, the result is always an increase. I've never seen someone go back in and the salt go down, even if they win, right? Especially, I mean, you watch the classic like Excellent Adventures. Mike gets salty, and then Mike gets thrown back, and Mike wins. Mike's still angry, right? And I think that's anybody. Like, if you get salty and win, you're still angry at the person. You're angry at them for beating you once, and you're angry at them for being the kind of player that they are. And then you're just angry, and that doesn't make you the next match with a brand new person. You're not going to play anybody because you're still angry about that last match.
Yeah, that kind of match becomes a preservation of ego rather than actually trying to get better at that point.
Yeah, true. It becomes a lot of things. I think one of the number one things that gets tinged upon in the human heart in saltiness is this feeling of injustice. I think ego and embarrassment is something. absolutely, and depending on the match, it can be only that. But I think more often than anything, not it's this feeling of injustice. It's feeling like something was taken from you unfairly by this person that should not have been taken from you. And if things were correct, it would have been awarded to you rather than them. So someone else received what was rightfully yours, and the points represent that. The you win, you lose represents that. The knowledge of I beat you, right, in 2 rounds, 3 rounds represents that. And I think it's just this. I think personally, I could be wrong about that, but I think that's what tinges in the human heart most often. But I think, yeah, when it comes to salt, aggravation, anger, it has to be completed. It must reach catharsis, or the next match is only going to feed it. Mm-hmm. So whatever it takes to completely let the air out is what you got to do. Most effectively is leave. Most effectively is always just leave. Or like leave the game on, watch a video, then come back. But the problem is if you're starting to get tilted in the middle of a game or during a set and you can't get up. Yeah, that one, deep breath and focus. I think the best things you do is deep breath and focus on basic, simple things. Strip your game down as much as possible. Deep breath, go to extremely basic gameplay, and focus on hitting the most fundamental things. Hit every anti-air, simply meaty, and control space. Don't be over-aggressive. Be reversal often, and keep the pressure off yourself to just give yourself a moment to reset this match and totally slow down the other guy's roll. So I think in an actual match, that's the best thing you can do. Deep breath and strip your game down to as fundamental as possible and make sure you're hitting the most simple things. Because if you're missing the most simple things, you're guaranteed to lose. You miss the anti-air, you're going to lose. You drop your combo, you're going to lose. And you're going to blow your lid because the combo dropped. It's like you finally got a hit on this guy and you're ready to get started and you're flying in the air on a drop combo and they get a full punish because you dropped your combo and it's the game 12. I think that's the best thing you can do if it's mid match. If it's post match, leave. Cool off, come back when it's settled.
Yeah. And to add on to that, what I do with my clients, like whether they be like players or otherwise, the first thing I guess I should mention, I talk about this kind of often now, is like there's kind of a formula when it comes to understanding emotions. Like it's oversimplified, and I can't explain the whole entire thing in time. But one, I think there's 2 major forms of tilt. And the formula is also this: your thoughts dictate your actions, and your thoughts dictate your emotions, and your emotions dictate your actions. Mm-hmm. And so, the core thought with like anger would be conflict. You feel wronged in some way, whether it be your ego, or you think the game is broken, or this person's cheap, or you're mad at yourself. One of those things that leads to you being angry. That leads to a form of defiance, and that could be like mashing DP when you know it's not your turn, or playing overly aggressively. Sometimes that works for people because you overwhelm other people, and they might be tilted as well. I think the other side of tilt, which is kind of the flip side of that, is almost the victim mentality. You play the victim. That's the core thought. If something's happening to you, this isn't fair. This person's like playing an overpowered character, all these other things. That leads to a sense of apathy, sadness. And that emotion tends to lead to lethargy. And you'll notice that some people turtle up, or they don't make decisions when they could have, or they drop combos. Those are the 2 major forms that I kind of categorize. And so what I do, it's a practice. That's not going to happen in one set. But it's something that I encourage players and just people in general to do, is to monitor their thoughts. Like I'll ask them, what was a thought that led to you tilting? Like when they come back to me and they say they played a match in a tournament and they tilted, I'm like, what were you thinking? And then how did you feel? Or usually it depends on the person. Like I'll ask them, how do they feel? Because some people are more in tune with their emotions. Some people are more in tune with their thoughts. It depends on if they're more cerebral or emotional. So that's usually what I do. And you'll find that like a lot of times, like they have these certain triggers that happen. And they react to that. And so part of like learning to monitor your thoughts, like, you have the resources that you said, like your 6 resources, but I think you also have the mental resource where you have to pay attention to what's going on in your brain. I'm sure you could count that down to different things, but over time, what I find is they start to realize what they're thinking, and rather than falling into that trap, they actually just avoid it altogether. They might, fall into it for a second, but then they realize they can kind of pull themselves out, focus more on the match, like you said. basically go back to the basics and focus on your breath. So it's like what you're talking about is exactly what they do, but like an extra step is monitoring what you're thinking that leads to that emotion, and then you're able to actually switch their thought before it actually goes to that emotion and tilts them.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think it's a really good breakdown, and the pathways I think are very, very accurate to the two things that people do and why they do those. That's really good. I like that a lot.
Appreciate that. So I see you're pumping out some content now, which is awesome. I'd like to know, what's in the future for you, and then also where can people reach you if they want to work with you or watch your content, whatever.
So it used to be, right, I was doing Fighters Dojo, and that's kind of like the guide. That's the what's what in Street Fighter. That's the understanding the mechanics of the game, and understanding some of the interplay of the different scenarios in the game, and how to utilize different options and what makes each thing strong. So kind of that's much more informational. And then I'm doing now Walking the Path. It's a lot easier to produce, as well as I don't think I have too much more to add to the Fighters Dojo. I think it's pretty complete, because anything else is really just application of what's in those videos. So it's just kind of like, yeah, if you take what's in videos 3, 7, and 9, you have what you should have done in this scenario, or something like that, right? I'm just naming off random videos. But I mean, I think it covers pretty well. It's 20 episodes. I think it covers pretty well the basics of Street Fighter V and just kind of fighting game basics and mentality. So Walking the Path is very much geared at helping people learn and develop their own situational awareness and game sense. I like that term a lot, game sense. I have a student of mine who's a very, very good FPS player on PC, and he plays a couple other games like League and Hearthstone very well. But I mean, he was scouted by multiple CS:GO and Overwatch teams, and now he's grinding Fortnite because that's where it's at right now. But he talks about game sense a lot, and we talk about it a lot, especially in Hearthstone, that people are just not thinking about what cards I most likely have and how to play around the scenario that they're setting themselves up for by playing this card now on this board. And so that overlap is huge in terms of trying to help people develop game sense. What's going on right now with the 6 or 7? Well, I guess the 6 resources are what's in front of you, always being shown to you, and then the 7th is what you got to control. But with the information on the screen and what you've seen this person doing, what should you do when? And so what I do is I just play ranked on the Fighters Dojo account, and I try to actively talk through and explain why I'm doing what I'm doing and what I'm thinking about. And I even explain, like, hey, this could have gone wrong if they did this. I just didn't believe he was going to. That way they know I'm not doing things in a guaranteed way. I'm doing things I have a suspicion for these reasons that this option is going to work, and that if he had done the other thing, I would have been blown up. But even if he did that, I was okay with it for these reasons. So that's why I chose this option. And obviously I kind of explained that after the fact, because in the moment I'm currently doing moves. But so I'll kind of state what I'm doing and what I'm looking for in general, and then explaining the scenarios after the matches. And that's Walking the Path. I'm just kind of churning those out as much as I can. I'm trying to show losses as well as wins. The problem is that a lot of the losses I have are usually really laggy ones. So I'm like, this doesn't really show anything. But I do. There's definitely, I think the next one's going to have a Dulcim that beats me in a difficult tight match, and then something. There's other losses coming out. But yeah, that's what I do. I was doing Patreon. I had a Patreon, and you can sign up for that for live coaching. But because my firstborn should be coming next month, I will not be doing Patreon at all for the foreseeable future, because that's clearly going to make us busy.
Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. Appreciate that. So I don't have any way for people to work with me personally. I was doing that. I'm just not available. I'm going to have to kind of cut that off and carve out that time for my family. But I'll try and keep going with at least Walking the Path. People have responded very, very well to it. They find it extremely helpful. And that is really helping them understand the thought process of a fighting game. So.
Awesome. Okay, well, where can they find that? Like, where can they find you and that?
Yeah, so if you just search Frabisaur on YouTube, that would be my channel. Fighters Dojo is the kind of the ins and outs of Street Fighter V content. Walking the Path is the ranked and commentary stuff. I have a few other videos on there about different things. I think I have some DBZ on there. I know I have some Tekken on there with a guy from Charlotte that's actually very good. And I have some other just Street Fighter and Nash stuff that I think I just kind of made ad hoc. But yeah, that's the main stuff. And then Twitter at Frabisaur. I'm super active on Twitter. That's the #1 place people like ask me questions and I respond to them.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining. This has been an awesome conversation. Probably went on a little longer than it should have, but I enjoyed having these conversations. Hopefully one day you can come back on the show and we can talk some more, because there's tons more we can talk about and break down. But until then, I'm the Philosopher. Thank you guys so much for watching this. As always, I will see you guys in the next one, but make sure you let us know if you've seen his content down below. Get that conversation going, and what did you get out of this conversation as well? I'd love to know, what's going on in your brain right now just from what we talked about. But of course, thank you guys, and I will see you later.
Thanks, see ya.